senior officers. And at the end of that week, the retired general that was in charge of it had the last wrap up. And he had 15, 20 minutes. I think he took 5. And he said something that has really stuck with me, and I've told the story many times since. And he said, somebody asked me what it takes to be a successful flag officer. I'm going to tell you what I told them. First is humility. And I turned to the guy and I said, see, they do teach that. But he said, it is very important for a leader to be humble. And he says, there are times, I mean, you know, you've got all these stars, you're out there, the world's looking at you, you're really powerful, and you can get caught up in that. So he says, I recommend that you take a dose of humility every day. And when things are going very well, take 2 doses. Number 2, he said, as you get older, you know, you tend to be more kind. He said, why wait? Start being kind now. And number 3, he said, there are times when you're going to feel that the world is all on your shoulders and you're responsible for everything and the weight just is hard to bear. He said, there are thousands of people who would give anything to be in your shoes. Enjoy the moment. It passes. Friends, I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you. I started a business consulting, strategizing, I could say lobbying, but you know, all the presidential candidates beat up on lobbyists. And it's been a great experience being able to work with my son, with great people that we have on our team. But I have not purposely talked to any of my friends from Congress. And this morning I was able to ride over with them on the bus, and just seeing them again was really, really great because they're wonderful people. You know, they get beat up a lot, and they get accused of corruption and all this terrible thing that's happening in Washington. Let me just tell you, there's a lot of very good, dedicated people that sacrifice a lot to be there doing what they're doing. One of them I'd like to mention and bring him up to the stand is Mac Thornberry, the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee. You know, we sat together in Congress for 20 years on that committee. Mac is a very serious, very dedicated, very smart, much smarter than I am, much more intelligent, eloquent, able to lead that committee and do wonderful, wonderful things. I am so happy that he's there and I'm not. And I'm so happy with the job that he is doing. We are in good hands. He is doing a fantastic job. I'm just watching from a distance because we haven't communicated. But we're in good hands, and all of his colleagues, those that have come that are serving on those committees, I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you for the great job you're doing. I was talking to Mac on the way in. He says, I got the NDAA passed twice this year. You know, most of us are happy to get something done once, but he's, in his first year, he comes out and does it twice. And that's great. Mac Thornberry, the gentleman from Texas.
Well, I think we've proven one thing this morning. Buck has gotten kinder as he's gotten a little older, and I appreciate very much those kind words. But I think it's really important for us to remember why we're all here and how we got here. The kernel of this idea started with Buck McKeon and Roger Zakheim and Bob Cochran about trying to get the top folks related to national security in one place at one time to discuss the big challenges facing our country. And it didn't just stop with the idea. they made sure, with Buck's leadership, Buck being on the phone, to get the top civilian and military leaders here among us, the top industry leaders here, the top journalists, the top influencers and thinkers, having all of those folks come together at one time in one place, especially this place, with the shadow of Ronald Reagan hanging over us, this beautiful venue, to wrestle with the challenges of national security that face our country. It's a unique event, and it's because of Buck's leadership that this event takes place. But I believe that the repercussions of this event extend beyond this day, that it also helps to reinforce and reinvigorate the broad bipartisan national security consensus in our country by having all these folks together and wrestling with those challenges. So it's a very important thing that Buck has started, and I think for the good of the country, it is important for us to continue to build on his incredible leadership. So I really appreciate, first and foremost, the library, John Highbush and Fred Ryan, the Ronald Reagan Foundation for not only the beautiful setting, but for your hospitality that makes everything run so well as the sponsors and all of the participants that make such a difference. And one of the great things is you got all these smart people in the room, and they let some of us who are in Congress sit in and listen to learn something. And I want to take just a moment to recognize my colleagues from the House and the Senate who are with us today and some I think are still coming in over the course of the day. But from the Senate, we'll have Chairman John McCain and Ranking Member of the Armed Services Committee, Jack Reed. We have this morning Senator Joni Ernst, who is a terrific member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. In the House, we have the Ranking Member from our Armed Services Committee, Adam Smith. We have the Chairman of the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee, Rodney Frelinghuysen. We have the Chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, Michael McCall, the Ranking Member of the Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff. We have Ken Calvert of California, Defense Appropriator. We have Andrew Crenshaw from Florida, Defense Appropriator. We have Randy Forbes from Virginia, Chairman of the Subcommittee on Sea Power and Projection Forces. We have Dr. Brad Winstrup of Ohio, a member of the Armed Services and the Intelligence Committee. We have Bradley Byrne of Alabama of the Armed Services Committee. And last but not least, Steve Knight, who not only is a member of our Armed Services Committee, but is the current congressman for the library. So I really appreciate our members who have taken time away from their districts or states to come be a part of this, to learn and maybe occasionally contribute a little bit. So I look forward today, I look forward to the great panels, the great speakers, and I also look forward to eavesdropping on some of the side conversations, because that's where you learn about as much as anything over the course of the event. So it is now my privilege to get us started, and with that I want to introduce the first moderator of the first panel for the 2015 Reagan National Defense Forum. Yochi Dreazen is the managing editor for news at Foreign Policy Magazine, a site I'm sure most everybody in this audience refers to frequently. And so if Yochi will come up and introduce our moderators, then we'll get started.
Hi, good morning. I'll be sitting on the left, but do want to start calling up the people who will be sitting up here with me. I'm honored to be up here with the Chief of Staff of the Army, Mark Milley. Also with the Commander of Southern Command, General John Kelly. As was mentioned before, Senator Joni Ernst. The former Secretary of Defense, Bill Lynn. And Lieutenant Joseph Riley. Thanks. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. I'm sure, like most of you, this is a typical Saturday morning back at home where you wake up and there's a room of 700 people of really impressive backgrounds and really impressive interests. But it is really genuinely an honor to be here with all of you. I was thinking about how to perhaps kick off this conversation and thought back to a moment I'd had in New York about a year ago that has really stuck with me. I had gone down there to do an interview for my book, and the woman I was interviewing called me to say, I apologize in advance, but I'll be a bit of a mess when you get here. I'll tell you why when you arrive. And the reason why was she had discovered that morning that the best man at their wedding, her husband was Special Forces, the best man had been killed that morning in Afghanistan. And we were walking through Manhattan on the way to get coffee, and she was sobbing, understandably. And I was thinking to myself that we probably passed 1,000 people or 2,000 people over the course of that walk. Most of them probably had no idea we were still in Afghanistan. Most of them probably didn't know anybody who had served in Afghanistan. Many of them may have never seen anybody in uniform, except perhaps at the airport. And just the contrast for me of seeing this very professional-looking, very attractive young woman whose life had been shattered, and then around her this bustling city that had zero connection to that particular moment in time was really striking to me. And I thought that'd be a good way for us, perhaps for us to start. We live in a culture where there's thank you for your service. We all hear it. Those of you in uniform, you hear it when you're in airports. I think people who say it from a place of good intent, and it's heartfelt. But it is a single phrase. And for many people, that's their connection. They thank someone for their service, and then they go about the rest of their day. And I wonder if perhaps I could ask each of you just to talk a bit about what does that phrase mean, and also how do you move beyond it?
Want me to start?
Yeah, if you would, please.
All right, that's great. Army leads the way. So, I have to pay homage to the Marines. My dad was with the 4th Marine Division, and I know General Kelly's from Boston, and any self-respecting young male from Boston is going to join the Marines. But at least this son of a Marine went in the Army. So I would say that phrase, thank you, does matter. I don't want to downplay that because as we go through airports or train stations or just walk down the street, it is fundamentally important that the American people demonstrate their thanks and appreciation in a human way to those of us in uniform. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, it rings hollow, though, if all it is words, and it doesn't come through in substance. So things like, for the Army, readiness is our #1 priority, so that costs a lot of money. So if you don't have the money to back up the readiness, then just saying thank you doesn't do well. My dad hit the beach at Iwo Jima, so saying thank you hitting the beach at Iwo Jima wasn't going to do much. You had to have trained and ready Marines ready to close with and destroy the enemy. So readiness is fundamental, and the words have to be backed up with substance. That's how I'd react to that.
Well, I'll start out by saying I'm the son of a United States Army soldier who served during World War II, and hugely proud of that experience. Talked about it all the time. Served with the Marines on Guadalcanal, so we're of the same opinion, at least on our dads. I think it matters. The one thing as military people we do in fact serve the nation and all of its people, of course. There's a lot fewer of us. The day of the mass military is gone, and hopefully we won't need that big a military again in the future. But the point is that there are a lot fewer people that know us. But that said, they appreciate us. When they say thanks for your service, I always see them before they come up. You know they're going to come up, and I see them because they feel awkward about how to approach you and just say thanks. I don't think I've ever had anyone say thanks to me that it didn't come from their heart. I think if they're parents, they know that their children are safer because of what I do, what we do. I think if they're not parents, they're just young people. They think perhaps I should have joined as well and maybe done my part. Not everyone has to, not everyone should. Most aren't qualified to. But yes, I think it's a wonderful thing when just a nameless American citizen walks up to me and says thanks.
Yes, Thank you. It's great to be on this panel this morning with so many distinguished, very important people. So thank you. But it does mean a lot when someone comes up to me and thanks me for my service. There are so few of us now in Congress that have served or continue to serve. Many years ago, it was 50%. Now we're about down to 20% of us that have served in Congress. So there is a little bit of a disconnect between our civilian population and maybe those that serve, and truly understand what's going on behind the scenes and what a soldier or Marine experiences, what an airman experiences. So it takes a lot for somebody just in that civilian capacity to walk up and say thank you for your service, because maybe they don't truly understand what that young man or woman has gone through. So we need to continue that dialogue and make sure they understand really what's going on with our uniformed armed services. But it's been a great honor for me to serve. I appreciate it so much, and I appreciate the support that we get from the American people.
Yeah, I think the phrase "thank you for your service" represents basically half of the equation, and an important half. It represents a respect for the military that's demonstrated in the polling. I mean, while all of our other institutions, religious, political, have really fallen in terms of public esteem, the military has risen. Generally the most admired institution. I think it's because of the people in it and what they're doing, and I think that phrase reflects that gratitude and that respect. I think it doesn't reflect the other half of the equation. I think it's what Senator Ernst was saying. It doesn't reflect an understanding at a personal level of what kinds of sacrifices are being made, what's done inside the institution, what the policies, as General Milley was saying, the importance of money for readiness. I think so. Where it reflects respect on one hand, it doesn't encompass the understanding we need on the other hand.
Well, first of all, I would say that General Milley's staff, when I reached out to him and they found out I was a lieutenant, they asked if there was anything they could do to make me more comfortable, and I said maybe someone on the panel who's not a four-star general, a senator, or former deputy secretary of defense. So I'm glad they put me on the end. I don't have a comparative advantage in speaking to a lot of these issues, but I guess the one area where I can talk is I'm probably the most recent person on this panel to have been in college. And so when I went to the University of Virginia, as far as civil-mil divide relations are concerned, I think the piece that James Fallows put in was that people appreciate, but perhaps they don't understand. And at least when I was at UVA, there was definitely a very sincere appreciation from the other students for what those in ROTC were going to do and what those who are veterans had done. I think the bigger problem is whether or not they understand, and then the question becomes, is it they don't understand because they don't care and don't want to understand, or is it because there aren't as many avenues for them to try to learn? And I think it's because there's not as many avenues. I was able to teach a class on ethics and modern warfare where I brought in combat veterans to teach students who didn't have any background in the military. The class filled up the first day it was offered. We hosted a big dinner for 250 students to have dinner with veterans, both from the recent wars and previous wars. That filled up again within 2 or 3 days. So I think there's a genuine desire, at least among college students and young people around the country who aren't serving in uniform, to try to learn more about the sacrifices that are involved. And then I think it's incumbent upon us in the military, all the way from the very senior to the junior levels, to give them opportunities to do that.
Hey,
can I just add, I don't want to make, I'd caution people about making too much of the 1% serve sort of thing. In the long span of American history, the anomaly is when a lot serve. 10% of America served in World War II. That's the greatest war in the history of the world. Only 3 or 4% served in the Civil War. So 1% in uniform in American history is not necessarily out of the norm of American history. And I think the burden of explaining ourselves and helping the American people understand what their military does, I think that burden's on us, those of us in uniform, not necessarily the American people. I mean, there has to be a level of effort and a willingness to listen, but we in uniform we've got to get out there, be seen, be known. We can't isolate ourselves as a subculture and a gated community. We are the people's army, and we have got to get out there with the people on a routine basis and explain to them what we do. They're paying for us, and they have a right to know. We use the media, interface, conferences, and so on and so forth. But really, I think, in my perspective anyway, the burden is more on us in uniform to articulate what we do and what it is they're paying their money for, rather than trying to draw walls between us and those that don't serve. A lot of people out there are serving in a lot of different ways. Teachers and doctors and EMTs and so on and so forth are serving their country as well. And we in uniform need to remember that.
That's actually a beautiful place for me to start, actually, with a question for you. Do you think the military has made a mistake by consolidating so many of its troops at bases in parts of the country many Americans don't go through, in closing some of the ROTC chapters in colleges on the coast and closing down some of the recruiting stations in major cities? You know, you mentioned that 1%, the figure itself may not be all that much out of history, but in terms of who make up that 1%, if you're getting people from the South, from the Midwest, but you're not getting people from the coasts, is that a problem? And if so, how do you try to fix it?
Well, for the Army, we disengaged from the Holy Land up in Boston quite some time ago. So I'm not sure. Maybe now as a chief I can put a few things back up there. But the Army demographic, which is different than Marine and Navy and Air Force, but the Army demographic fundamentally, probably 60+% of those in the Army, if you draw an L right down the Rocky Mountains either side, right down to the Rio Grande and the Mexican border, and then go east across the South, that's 60% of the United States Army. It comes from the mountain Midwest and the South, the heartland, really. And then we are underrepresented, more or less, on either coast where the high density of the populations are in the urban areas of the United States. So for the United States, as we look forward, or for the Army as we look forward, we need to engage, we need to make some adjustments and engage more heavily, I think, in the Northeast and on the West Coast, because the nature or the character of warfare in the next 25, 30, 40 years is going to lend itself, I think, to some of the things that are being done on either coast in terms of the technological innovations that are being done, the IT world, robotics, et cetera. And we need to leverage that. We need to leverage that, we, the Army, need to leverage that talent, and we are underrepresented on either coast. So for our demographic, we're coming from, right now anyway, we're coming from the mountain Midwest and the South, 60+%.
So how do you do that in practice?
How do we change that?
Yeah.
Well, we have, recruiting command is a big deal. We have also our universities and our RTCs. We have a lot of those and spread out. We're underrepresented in Northeast schools and in the West Coast schools. And then through our units and getting out. So just because I commanded 10th Mountain, just because 10th Mountain, is 30 minutes from the Canadian border, doesn't mean they can't travel. So when we were up there, we said, okay, 10th Mountain, your mission is to conduct engagement, be out and be seen, get out with schools, police forces, fire departments, get out in educational systems, march in parades, be seen, and engage the American people from the Ohio River to the Atlantic Ocean, from the Canadian border down to the border of Pennsylvania, Mason-Dixon line. And that was 10th Mountain's AOR, if you will, for engagement. Same thing when I commanded 3rd Corps. The tendency on units, 3rd Corps is at Fort Hood, tendency of units in the Army is to engage the local communities right in and around your base. But those communities are very familiar with the military. They're dealing with them all the time. So if you're at Fort Hood, we drew a line halfway through Texas, and we said, okay, Fort Hood, you've got from Oklahoma to Houston. And Fort Bliss, you got everything west. You got Arizona, New Mexico, and West Texas. And then we carved it all up and said, this brigade, you're going to these schools, these police departments, these fire departments, you're marching in these parades, et cetera. It's important the American people see, touch, and feel their soldiers. So that's a way of doing it. I'm not saying it's the best way, but it's a way. And then media, of course, is a big way.
Wonderful, he says, to a member of the media. General Kelly, I'd like to actually, if I could, read a quote from you a couple of years ago and just ask you to respond back to it. If anyone thinks you can somehow thank them for their service and not support the cause for which they fight, that these people are lying to themselves and rationalizing away something in their own lives, but more importantly, they're slighting our warriors and mocking their commitment to this nation. And then the second half of it, the chattering classes, by which I assume people like me, endeavor to make them and their families out to be victims, but they're wrong. We who have served and are serving refuse their sympathy. It was obviously with the kind of subtlety that many Marines are known for, but I wonder if you could perhaps talk to what you were responding to at that moment in time, and if you feel that those issues remain today.
Exactly what I was thinking when I said that was at the time we had many thousands of young men and women in Afghanistan and Iraq and around the world. And I believe, I mean, everyone has a right to their political beliefs, and we're a democracy, and they can feel for or against. But it just seemed to me that when this country commits young people, or any people, to a conflict, they should be supported. And I think sometimes, with all due respect to our government, we tend to do things without involving the people. Post 9/11, obviously, there was huge hue and cry, naturally, to do something about what had just happened to us. And so we had a lot of, I think the vast majority of our population are very, very positive about what President Bush did, as an example. But as that stretched out, I think we didn't engage the representatives of the people, the Congress, to the degree that we should have. And perhaps they didn't get engaged enough to have a real national debate on what we were doing and how we were doing it. And yes, there were field commanders that were coming in, asked for their best military advice, and that we're paid to give our best military advice. So you had field commanders coming in saying, this is what I need to do what you want me to do. But as I say, I think when the nation commits its military to a conflict, I think we should be behind them. It doesn't say we can't debate the pros and cons of what we're doing, but I really do wish there was much more involvement across the government in what we do, because at the end of the day, about the worst thing that, and I deal with a lot of Gold Star families, about the worst thing that a Gold Star family or young men and women who have lost buddies in combat, about the worst thing, question they can ask us, and I know Mark and people in uniform get this all the time, was it worth it? And we believe it was worth it because we volunteered to do it. Those young people that give their lives believe it's worth it because they volunteered when they didn't have to. But I do believe that we have a responsibility to the families, to the individuals, and to our nation to have a debate on this and make a decision. And when that decision is made by the people's representatives, then to get behind it.
I mean, just to follow very briefly, but how do you walk that kind of narrow line between, on the one hand, being thankful and sympathetic, but on the other, not just assuming a person who served is a victim who deserves sympathy?
Yeah, I mean, usually when you would, the victim thing is, of course, when you see the young people who have lost legs and arms and faces out there, and people, it's very gratifying to me that Americans have accepted this generation of injured in a way that we've never seen before. Back during the Vietnam War, you never saw an amputee walking about, with a pair of shorts on. My daughter is engaged to a young Marine who lost a leg in Afghanistan. And I asked him about, why do you walk around with shorts most of the time? He says it's just easier to get the leg on and off. In the Vietnam War, you would never have seen that. People stayed behind closed doors, Marines and soldiers and others that were injured. But the sense that we're victims, that sometimes, with all due respect, people like you are in your business, make us out to be, and then use that to beat up an administration, whether it's the Obama administration or the Bush administration. We don't want that to happen to us. We're not victims. We know what we were doing. We know what we were getting ourselves into. And we fought for our country. They fight for their country and for their buddies. And we're not victims, even if we lose our lives, in my opinion.
Senator, you alluded before to some of the numbers of members of Congress, by which I mean both houses, I looked up some of the stats because they were fascinating to me. So in the 70s, roughly 70% of the Senate were veterans.
Correct.
The peak was 1983, where there were 76 members of the Senate who were veterans. In 1977, 80% of the House were veterans, so these numbers are really staggering. And as you point out correctly, now it's about 20% roughly in each House. How does that change the tenor of the debate when you have a relatively small percentage? I mean, a fifth is not nothing, but much smaller than the past who have served. And also, do you feel as if people who have served who are now in the Senate, one, have more responsibility, or two, deserve or should get in any way more deference from their colleagues than those who have not?
Well, thank you. I think it does make a very big difference with the numbers of veterans and those that have served in Congress going down. It's wonderful, and we have some great representation here that with General Milley and General Kelly, they can come, they will present. We have 3- and 4-star generals that will present in front of us as members of Congress. I think that's wonderful. However, having been a person that has served in a much lower capacity, I think it's important because those of us that have served, we have been young lieutenants, we have been young privates, corporals, and we've come up through the ranks. We understand the challenges at that very basic level where the rubber meets the road. Those that haven't served in that capacity maybe only get that high altitude vision of what's going on around the globe and how we're engaging our military members. But if you've served, you understand those trickle-down challenges. So maybe you're not getting your parts on time, to keep your vehicles up and running. Maybe you're not getting that ammunition supply. Maybe you've got challenges with your DFAC and your food service. It's all those things that we understand, and we get that at that very bottom level. Those that haven't been there don't get those challenges. So, I love it when we have presenters that come in and give us the big picture. But for those of us that served, we understand there's so much more going on at the battalion level, at the company level, in those squads and those teams. So that's a value that we bring to those discussions, and understanding that even greater picture at the very basic level. Connecting to the communities, another aspect of what we do as well. I'm blessed to serve in the Iowa Army National Guard. And throughout Iowa, you can't step outside your house and throw a rock without seeing somebody else that has served in your community. So we're blessed in that aspect. But you go to many other areas where you don't recognize who those veterans are. So it is, I want to go back to what General Milley had said earlier, it is important that we as service members are sharing those experiences with our friends and neighbors. That's the way they will truly understand what we do and why we do it. Honor, duty, service, all of those wonderful things. And General Kelly, back to what you said as well, we're never victims, always survivors. So that's up to us to communicate that message, whether it's in the Senate, whether it's in the House, or whether it's out in our communities.
Secretary Lynn, there's let any deserved applause be applauded. There's obviously a cultural aspect to this beyond the kind of politics, beyond the kind of conversation on the policy level. When you have pop culture begin to try to digest military service, right? You have one model in which anyone who's a veteran in a movie or a TV show is the hero, and you have the other model, mainly post-Vietnam, where anybody who served is the deer hunter, that they're the kind of ticking time bomb who comes back with PTSD and are inherently unstable. And how do you navigate that? I mean, how do we get to a place, do you think, where military service can be seen by the culture, by the pop culture, as something that doesn't lend itself to an extreme of pure heroism or to the extreme of damaged person who's at risk of going crazy?
Well, I think that's sort of the underlying premise of the whole panel. It's called Bridging the Gap. I think what you're trying to do is bridge the gap in both directions. It's as we talked about, it's not a good thing to have a society that doesn't understand the military choices, military policies, the lives of military people. So the separation, I think, undercuts public policy decision-making at a fundamental level. Similarly, if the military becomes a subculture and separates from society, it gets more separated from the whole value system it's defending, and that can have untoward consequences. I think you want to move towards connecting that fabric to bridge that gap, as you said. And I think as General Milley referred to as the numbers, this isn't really a number issue. It's the numbers are cyclical. When we have major wars, Civil War, World War I, World War II, we have a large portion of the population serve. I think the numbers you're talking about with Congress, a lot of that was so high because it was the peak of the World War II generation, so it was a natural thing to have that many serve. That's not really the norm. I think there's also in this a fundamental public policy choice we made, which was to move from conscription to an all-volunteer, professional-based military. That has implications for the size of the military, and that's part of what we're dealing today. I don't think, though, anybody wants to go back, or not anybody, but very few want to go back and reverse that decision. We gained enormous benefits in terms of our security, in terms of the value that military has brought and the professionalization of that military. I think what we need to go after to bridge this gap is not the numbers, it's not that policy choice, it's the other more subtle things. It's the geography you referred to. As General Milley was talking about, broaden the geography from which we recruit. Now that's a budget issue. Part of the reason we recruit where we do is because that's where the highest propensity to enlist is. It's going to take more recruiting resources to recruit in areas that have less propensity, but I think so we ought to probably make that investment. I think the military has more become a family business. I think we want to broaden, not just have sons and daughters of military members join, but to broaden that. And we also, I don't know quite how to say it politely, but there's in some ways a class issue there too. You want all strata of society involved in the military, all income levels, all parts of society. I think that's going to be the best way that we get across that gap to close that gap that you talked about.
I think it's an interesting point you made a second ago about the possibility of it being a closed culture, in part because of military families. It's a wonderful thing that honor is seen by a father that passes to, General Milley, General Kelly, to you, and then to your children. But there seems like there also potentially is a downside for the culture as a whole, for the country as a whole, if you have more people in the military come in from a military background and fewer come in because their father was a doctor or their mother was a doctor and they chose that path in any event. Lieutenant Riley, maybe I could start and ask that question to you. You've had the experience both at UVA, you've had the experience now at Oxford for the Rhodes Scholarship. What are you finding when people discover that let's say at Oxford, when somebody finds out that you're an Army lieutenant, what's their response? Or at UVA for that matter, what was their response?
Yeah, I would say one thing, to the extent that we worry about civil-mil divide issues here, living in the UK and going to Oxford has reassured me that our country does a far better job of recognizing and understanding and appreciating the service of those who are currently in the military and those who are veterans. In terms of how people respond, there is sometimes a kind of, why are you doing the military? Why would you not do something else? And I think that comes back to the fact that, going a little bit off your point, sir, at some of the lead institutions, we do not as good a job in terms of recruiting a large portion of those students to come. So it seems more foreign. And then those students who go to those institutions wind up continuing on to senior leadership in business sector and political sector, live in the kind of urban centers along the East Coast, the West Coast that we talk about. I know General Petraeus is here. His son went to Harvard and is actually very much the exception in that rule in terms of our ability to recruit from those institutions. So I think to the extent that there is a hesitation of why would this individual be serving in the military, I think that's driven primarily because, as we've said, they don't fully understand the benefits to be gleaned from military service in that way. That said, our generation is expecting to have multiple careers, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 careers. So I think on one hand that opens up a lot of opportunities for the military to come in and say, perhaps you're not intending to spend the 30, 40 years in the military, but this would be a fantastic way for you to develop small unit leadership at a very young age and develop a responsibility you wouldn't have otherwise. Now I think the challenge that comes with that expectation of my generation to have multiple careers is then we have to decide how do we convince at least some of these high performers to stay in the military and to commit to a career that's much longer than they would have in any other civilian sector. And I think there's a variety of ways we can do that. Lieutenant General Barno just had a great piece in the Atlantic that talks about how we manage talent and kind of allowing and recognizing in many ways that now spouses have careers that perhaps they didn't have as much so in previous generations, and working through that talent management process.
I wonder if you and I were talking right as we were walking on about your own personal contact with that system and the challenges it has for people who want to stay in but come in a slightly unconventional route, a Rhodes Scholarship being one of those routes. But can you talk a bit about what you ran into yourself as you were trying to figure out, and the Army was trying to figure out, frankly, what to do with you?
Right. So, I actually got a call from Branch 6 weeks ago that said I was not going to promote and go before a separation board and be pushed out of the Army. I was able to work through that, but the problem is the Army...
Only my Army.
No, it's
Let me get your Social Security number, son. We'll fix that real quick.
Yes.
Killing me, Lieutenant.
But no, basically what happened is that the military-wide, you have a kind of up-or-out promotion system. And so what happens is when people take, especially if it's a junior officer taking, a year or 2 years off of their timeline to go and complete an education program, the military personnel system expects that they're going to continue performing all of those jobs that a junior officer should. And if you're then in school, you're not performing those jobs. So while the military, I won't say just the Army, the military personnel management system can be maddening at times, and I think that many of the reforms that are being proposed to kind of help fix that are great. The inspiration is I've had multiple officers, hopefully now to include General Milley, which I think would be,
I'll be your personal assignments officer. I just adopted you.
Who have, really, my battalion command, who's going to be my receiving battalion commander, and many other officers who've gone out of their way above and beyond the call of duty, and really, in many ways, put their own reputations on the line to try to facilitate me. So, as I tell people all the time, the problem is not at all with the leaders we have in the military. The leaders are going far above anything that I even see people in the, kind of elite civilian companies doing. The problem is that there's a personnel system through which they must operate that requires this kind of extra bit of service on their part. So, I think to the extent the military can offer opportunities for young people that are going to recognize that the expectations that they have and the kind of challenges that they face are very different than previous generations, and that if we can reform the personnel system to that extent, that'll be...
General Kelly.
Let me just make a quick comment on my new best friend. Our personnel system, was designed essentially as an industrial age personnel system. There's a lot of legacy from World War II, and then DOPMA came in, and Secretary Carter has initiated a review of all that to put in some initiatives. There's no question, all of us recognize it from, private to general, that we have got to make some significant and fundamental changes to the personnel system to adjust to the needs of this century and to what we think is going to be the nature of warfare here in the next, 100 years or so. Those efforts are ongoing. There's anecdotes, like the good lieutenants, all over the place. I ran into a kid the other day who spoke literally 6 languages, and what do we got him doing? We got him as a truck driver out of Fort Lewis, and I'm sitting there going, oh my God. So there's 50,000, anecdotes out there of misplaced talent that goes out when we should be keeping it, talent that's in the wrong place, etc. It's by no means a perfect system, and we've got to improve it. There's no reason why we can't. There's all kinds of technologies out there to help us. There's systems that we can, best practices we can take from industry to do all of that. So I think it's widely recognized. And we all read General Barno's article, and we've got Secretary Carter's guidance, and and a lot of studies that have been done over the last couple of years. So I think it's widely recognized. I think we are, as an institution, moving in that direction. It's a complicated institution. The Army's got 1 million soldiers in it, spread from coast to coast, and 150,000 of them are overseas, defending our way of life on a daily basis. So it's a massive undertaking. The United States Army itself is the 3rd largest organization on the face of the earth, behind Department of Defense, of which we're a subsidiary, and the Chinese Army. So think about that. I mean, these are big, major organizations, institutional organizations of America. And we are recognizing the need for change. And we're going to change your life here shortly. So welcome back to the United States Infantry, young man. I hope you had a great opportunity reading at Oxford. Next year, we'll send you to Princeton.
And I would love to remind General Milley that being a truck driver is okay.
It is.
Having led a company of truck drivers.
But I don't know that I need a guy who speaks 5 languages.
But I will say the general's point is well taken. I had a young non-commissioned officer who had a master's degree in computer programming and was serving as a truck driver. A lot of talent out there. Of course, it's a little more difficult in the National Guard finding those units that are close, but we do have an incredible talent pool out there, and this young man would be very well suited for cybersecurity or intelligence, surveillance, or reconnaissance. So there's a lot of wonderful young men and women out there. We've got to find a better way of putting them into the right track where they can best benefit our armed services.
General Kelly,
A couple comments maybe. First of all, I think I can speak for the comment on the Marine Corps. Joe, this would not have happened to you had you been...
Okay, Dad. Okay, great Santini.
The second issue is none of us should forget even for a second that the whole point of the U.S. military is to fight the nation's wars. And within the military, there's no doubt we should allow people to do certain levels of personal development, get master's degrees, PhDs, take some time off, have children with and be able to do that if you're a servicewoman. But remember, it's all about fighting the nation's wars. It's not about personal development as the first priority. It's about fighting the nation's wars. And yeah, the personnel system, sometimes you get someone who can speak 6 languages doing something that may be, or someone who's a cyber expert who's doing something else. So you fix those kind of things. But we're all about fighting the nation's wars. Disconnect between our society and perhaps the military. I sit before you, certainly the oldest serving member of the U.S. Armed Forces, and I'm also confident that I'm the longest continuous serving member of the U.S. Armed Forces. I can remember, no. I say that only because, thanks. I say that only because I actually was drafted. And as Mark pointed out, I went down, took my physical, and no self-respecting guy in my neighborhood would go in the Army, so I joined the Marine Corps. And he said it first, I didn't say it. And as a young PFC back in those days, we're in this uniform because we weren't allowed to travel unless we wore this uniform. In airports all around the country, going back and forth from wherever I was going to Boston and whatnot and leave, everyone would ignore you. Everybody would ignore you. There was no thank you for your service. I didn't get spit on or anything like that. I'm not so sure that's even, but no, everyone would ignore you except for the veterans. Back in those days, it was the Korean War guys and the World War II guys, or just guys that had served, and they would come up and say thanks and buy you a beer. So our country had rejected its military back when we had a draft, and there were many more people serving in the armed forces. And that's the reason for that, I think. Very unpopular war, poorly reported, with all due respect, poorly reported by the media, and at the same time, our government was not telling the full truth about what was going on, and that was being reported by the media. And what happened was, in the opinion of the American public, as those of us that were serving in uniform, were not honorable servants of the nation, that if we were in Vietnam, we had done terrible things, you know, war crimes and things like that. You know, we've had a turnaround in that respect. But as I say, when people start talking about a draft or doing away with this or that, remember, at least in my lifetime, which is, I trump almost everyone in the room, in my lifetime, the worst civil-military relations was when we had a draft and when many, many, many more people were serving. So I would be just careful. The thing I think that has worked for us since we've had the all-volunteer force is a tremendous respect on the part of the Americans when they see us walk by, war or otherwise. They see us walk by and say, gee, there's someone that's actually made a commitment to something other than himself or herself. That's weird in our society. And I think whether they have that conscious thought, I think that's what they believe in their hearts. So they see us walk by. And then when there is a war, they say, here's a guy or a gal that didn't have to serve, but is serving. And that's really weird in our society, that people do things selflessly. And so I think that explains to a large degree why we're so well respected today. And a little bit, frankly, again, in your business, Yochi, the embedding of the media from the beginning. In fact, I remember there were a number of, when we crossed into Iraq and did what we did and served under great men like General Petraeus, I remember the media that befriended us, and we befriended them, would share that, gee, my publisher's really getting after me. I haven't written a bad story about the yet, you know, and I'm really under pressure to write some bad.
There needs to be a steady level of support for veterans, for people. We are going to have more people leaving the force as we come down a little bit. They're going to need jobs. Veterans unemployment is higher than the unemployment as a whole. That's completely unacceptable, and I think each company needs to do its part. And I think there's tax credits and things like that, but I don't think this is really a financial. It can be a financially incentivized. This has to be a leadership driven. This has to be the political leadership of the country demanding it, and the private sector leadership responding to that need, and that the importance of that continuing commitment long beyond when the conflicts have wound down to I don't know if they're going to completely go away, but wound down to a much lower level of violence.
Thank you. Please, sir, go ahead.
Might as well get it started here. Lucian Niemeyer, former SAS staffer. But the concern that I've had over the last few years, particularly when I was on the committee, was that we were losing sight of the covenant that we had established with the volunteer force. That in exchange for voluntary service commitment, for various reasons, the country would provide the resources, provide the training, provide the equipment needed to go ahead and make sure you could do your job effectively. With less and less folks in Congress had served in the military, is there a concern that maybe Congress is losing sight of that covenant, and particularly in light of debate about sequestration, that ultimately what should be sacred more than anything is to make sure that our force has what they need and it can be able to continue to operate as a volunteer force?
If I can respond to that, yes, thank you. I think that's why we do have to have such strong voices from those of us that have served addressing these issues. Sequestration has been horrible for our armed services. And again, having served in some of those lower capacities in the military, an example that I use is as a young company commander, a transportation company commander deploying overseas. Our first mission as a transportation company going up into Iraq, we did not have maps. We didn't have maps. Tennessee National Guard transporter company commander came over, drew a hand-drawn map for us to get us up to Baghdad International Airport. That can never happen. That should never happen. So we need to anticipate those needs and be able to fulfill those needs for our men and women on the ground. This is at those lowest levels. Now we have other things going on like aircraft carriers that are way over budget. We really have to address a lot of that, cutting waste within these programs, but also focusing at the very basic level and what do our soldiers, our Marines, and airmen need that will improve their survivability out there on the battlefield. Thank you. It's a great issue that we have to address.
We have a long history in our nation of unpreparedness. And there's no one in this room that's Nostradamus. You know, Clapper can't do it, Milley can't do it, Kelly can't do it. Nobody can tell you what's going to happen next year, 2 years from now, 5 years from now at all. The best we can do is give educated guesses. And in my mind, that covenant that you're talking about is in fact something that can't be broken, because the readiness of the force, the readiness of the joint force, the preparedness of that force to provide the everything from the lower end of humanitarian assistance into terror insurgency all the way up to high-end conflict, that is so fundamental to the defense of the United States. That covenant can't be. We do not know what's ahead of us. Lincoln thought he was entering a 90-day insurgency, and he ended in a 4-year bloodfest. We would chase Villa, 2 years after World War I started, and the next taking the Army Expeditionary Force to France. Got the Selective Service, the draft, passed in June of 1941, 2 years after the Germans invaded Poland. He gets the Selective Service Act passed by one vote in the summer of 41, 6 months before Pearl Harbor. And then we have the disaster at Kasserine. The Marines suffered at Tarawa. The Marines suffered at Guadalcanal. Our first battles are not exactly pinnacles of military glory here, and it has a lot to do with preparedness in the events and the months and the years leading up to the conflict. Task Force Smiths is a well-known story. So we have to avoid that, and we have to avoid it right this minute. If you look around the world today, there's enough instability, there's enough red flags, there's plenty of storm flags kind of fluttering in the wind. So be careful, Ranger. You don't know what's over that hill. So be ready, be strong, and it's through strength that you're going to have peace. It goes back to George Washington. You were here in the Reagan Library. I mean, that's what Reagan says, Washington said, but you can go all the way back through history. Aggression left unanswered leads to more aggression. You achieve peace because you're strong, you have military strength, you have the capability to defeat, deter your opponents, and assure your friends. It's a big world out there sometimes, and if we break that covenant, we will in fact suffer some consequences that none of us want.
We are. We're running short on time, but please.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm a Air Force veteran myself. You've talked about,
we have a continuous presence around the globe all throughout the year, not just this one select deployment that he was talking about. But we have members that are out in Kosovo. We see them in Iraq. We see them in Afghanistan. They're all over. But the American people don't realize that. They don't understand that. There is that disconnect. They don't understand that we have ongoing conflicts in many regions and areas otherwise that we help out in as well. They don't feel that pain of paying for those conflicts or those deployments, so they don't stay connected to what the military is doing and the presence that we have all around the globe, not just in a couple of theaters.
I think the biggest challenge we've faced on the budget side has been less the level of spending, which is by historical standards is relatively high. If you look over the course of the last 40 or 50 years, the problem has been the instability in the spending, driven in a lot of ways by the sequester and the inability to kind of wrestle our way to a path. The Pentagon, led the Department's finances for a number of years. The Pentagon doesn't do well without multi-year planning horizons. It's just too big a ship to turn if you have a new budget or a new budget level every 6 or 9 months, which has been the pattern over the past several years. So I think in that instance, the importance of the agreement that Congress recently passed, the 2-year budget, is not just the levels. Obviously, the defense got some additional resources, and that's well needed, but that ability to plan for at least 2 years is, I think, going to be as important as the level of spending. And if we can extend that 2 years and start to get some sort of predictability in the defense budget, I think that, more than changing the level of spending, is going to lead to the kind of more efficient planning and that we absolutely need.
I hope you can all join me, please, in thanking my panelists and the members of people on the stage. Thank you.